Welcome to your first guitar lesson. Now this is actually the first guitar lesson I typically give most people that come into my studio with a brand new instrument and no real experience. So we're going to cover some of the basics, the parts of the guitar. We're going to talk about sitting with the instrument. We're going to talk about how your picking hand works and how your fretting hand works, and get you started just with some basic chords and some strumming. If you look down below in the video description, you're going to find links to a bunch of other lessons that'll help you on your way to becoming a better guitar player. There's also going to be printable PDFs and some other materials available for you. And please subscribe. Hit the subscribe and the notification bell. We do a lot of things on the channel, both lessons for beginners, intermediate, advanced. We do play-along tracks and the occasional gear review. So first of all, let's just talk about the big parts of the guitar. This is the body. This is the neck. On the neck we have the fretboard, which is where the frets are. And the frets are the metal wire things that are going up and down. The headstock is this part up here, which has all of the tuners on it. Now this is an acoustic guitar. And those parts that we just described, they're going to be the same as if you're playing on an electric guitar. The only difference is that this guitar actually is a box that amplifies itself. That's part of what the sound hole is there for. Whereas an electric guitar, you need to plug into an amplifier. Just for comparison, here's an electric guitar. Same thing, body, neck, headstock. This is the bridge down here. This guitar has pickups, which is how the guitar hears the string and plays it through the amplifier. We'll talk about that stuff later on. At the headstock, you've got the nut, you've got the fret wires, the strings go through the nut, and they go onto the guitar tuners right there, and that's how you tune the instrument. The big things are the same regardless of whether or not you're playing electric or acoustic. So for the purposes of this lesson, that's essentially what you got to know. First things first, when we're holding the pick, and we're going to teach you how to play pick style in these lessons for strumming. All right, a pick is typically it's a piece of plastic, or sometimes it could be wood or metal, but usually it's some sort of plastic variant, and we use it to play through the string. The way that I hold a pick, and I use these kind of smaller picks by a company called Dunlop, is if you take your hand and you bring it in so that your first finger is not like this, but is actually just kind of pointing back at the base of your thumb, you should be able to put your thumb on top of that and it's going to fit, not like this. Right, and it'll look kind of like that. You don't want to be gripping too high. But the idea is we're going to put your pick on top of that first finger segment, and then we're going to put your thumb on top of that, so just a little bit of the pick sticks out. So if I'm playing a single note, or I'm strumming, it's essentially just the side of my hand that's actually going to make a contact. And it's not really my hand, but it's a little bit of the pick that sticks out. If you have a lot of the pick sticking out, it'll wobble around. If you hold it between other fingers, it'll tighten through the wrist. There's a lot of things. And you'll see people hold picks and play this stuff a lot of different ways. And some of them are pretty accomplished players. A lot of the stuff that I give you in these lessons is really about the way that I found is the most efficient way for people to learn in the beginning. And then once you're able to play, you can always make your own decisions about how you would like to do things. But in nearly 30 years of teaching guitar, a lot of the stuff I'm going to give you has been proven to be pretty successful with the majority of my students. So that's why I suggest holding the pick this way. That's kind of the first thing we're going to talk about. And that allows you, your movement through the wrist. When you're strumming stuff, right, it's not all tight. You're not doing that. And sometimes you hold like between these two fingers. I get a lot of students doing that. It's difficult to control that. Whereas when we have it where I showed you, your thumb is sitting on the bulk of the pick, and the pick is also kind of wedged here in the first segment and that fold between the first and second segments of your fingers. So it's not really going to go anywhere, and you don't have to grip it very tightly. So that's the picking hand for right now. That's our getting started. And you can use any kind of pick. I usually try and suggest people use medium or heavy picks. The thinner the pick you have, the harder it is to control it. A lot of people like those on acoustic guitars, but for me, I would rather have the smaller pick that has a little bit more of a pointy tip to it, and there's less material to shove through the strings, so there's less resistance. My fretting hand. So your finger, when you're actually playing a note on the guitar, it doesn't go on top of the fret, the metal part itself, it goes behind it. So This is the first fret, second fret, third fret, and we're referring to the spaces between the fret wires. So if I'm going to play on the biggest string, the sixth string, we always count the strings up from the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's the second fret, I'll put my finger here, and that's the sound I get. If I put it right on top of the fret wire, you may get a dull or a buzzy sound. We want the clear sound. We don't want the fingers to collapse. When you let your finger joints collapse, it does a couple things that work against you. One of them is when you keep the finger arched, it's like architecture. Essentially what happens is that allows you to press with force straight down on the point of your finger without pushing too hard. It transmits the force to the finger. Right. The other thing is that when you go sideways or you let the finger collapse, not only are you not putting the force in, you're going to squeeze harder, and then a lot of times you'll push the string out of tune, which we also don't want that either. Right, so we want to try and keep the fingers arched as possible, mostly on the fingertip. You'll find that sometimes you're going to have to play on the side of the finger. You have to move things around so they work for your hands. If you see my thumb, it's kind of in the center of my hand. Right, certain kinds of music, you want it in the center of your hand, but it might be lower on the back of the fretboard. For the chords we're going to talk about in the beginning, having it over the top actually makes it easier, because then you get more of this curvature on the fingers. It allows you to come around and come straight down on the strings. If you're too low, the fingers, it's more like this instead of like this. You're not getting that force directly onto the string, which gives you the cleaner fretted note sound. Right. Well, also, when you let fingers collapse, they have a tendency to touch the strings next to them, which actually keeps them from ringing. You get that instead of that. So you want to be careful with that. And as you play all the chords that we're going to talk about, you really want to try and make sure that we're hearing everything we're supposed to. Play through each chord, make sure that every note is both in tune and also sounds. If you notice, I'm playing my guitar on the strap, even when I'm sitting down. One of the things that you'll run into is if you don't have the guitar on the strap, you'll tend to conform to the guitar. You'll slouch over it. It also puts everything that you're trying to do away from you, and it makes it harder for you to be able to see what you're working on or where your hand is in the beginning. And also, it takes your hand, because your hand and your wrist, they work efficiently certain ways. But if you start twisting them in weird directions, it tightens everything in terms of muscles and tendons and all that other stuff that goes through there, and it makes it very difficult to move your hands or to play with any kind of force or accuracy. So you can see in these pictures here, if I'm sitting with the guitar, you want to sit in a chair that is not so low that your knees are higher than your hips. It helps to have them either equal or a little bit higher. This actually allows the instrument to kind of sit on the strap where it's going to be most ergonomic for the rest of your body. If you're not sitting with a strap, you'll notice that you can have something to put your foot up on, which will allow you to actually have the instrument at this angle. Now this angle here, it's like a 45 degree angle. It actually puts the guitar more in line with your fingers. If you have the guitar straight or pointing down like this, what happens is that your hand starts doing this, and then it becomes real difficult to actually move your fingers and to play cleanly. Having the guitar a little bit of an angle helps quite a bit. You can play with it flat like this, and it's not too bad, but it usually works the best this way. So I suggest you try it both ways. In this picture, I'm actually got my foot up on that red toolbox. They make footstools for classical guitarists, but you can use just about anything if you need to actually elevate your left knee in order to bring the guitar up a little bit. You want to sit with better posture than me? I'm looking at these pictures that I had my daughter take today, and my posture kind of stinks. It helps to sit up straight. And you want to just stay as relaxed as possible. If you've got the guitar on the strap, gravity's going to put it where it's going to do the most good, and then your hands will actually access the instrument pretty well. But if you're actually doing this thing where the guitar is down or pointing down, you're going to slouch and you're going to kind of conform to the instrument. It makes it really difficult to actually play anything accurately, especially in the very beginning when you're just learning how to finger chords and strum the instrument. That's most of the boring stuff, most of the basics of the instrument, but it's important to know all that. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to play some chords, some of your first chords, and we're going to talk a little bit about them. We're going to play an A chord, a D chord, and an E chord. And we're going to talk about not only how to make them sound good, but also the best way that you can practice them so you can start playing music quicker. So first things first, and that is we have these chord diagrams that we have to learn how to read. The chord diagram is like looking at your instrument where the headstock is pointing up at the ceiling and the strings are pointing down. So the lines going straight down are the strings. To the left side of your diagram, it's going to be the strings that are closest to your head. They're the lowest in pitch and they're also the thickest on the guitar. To the right side, those are the ones that are closest to your feet. It's kind of important to keep track of the orientation there. The dots are going to be what fret you put your finger at, and the numbers across the top, kind of you see where the nut is, that's the dark line. All right, that tells you first finger, second finger, third finger, fourth finger. If there's a 0 above that string, you play that without a finger on it. If there's an X, you don't want to play that string at all. That does not belong in the chord, and you need to be careful with your strumming hand that you don't play those. So now let's talk about the A major chord. I chose this one because the first thing we have to discuss is how the fingerings work, which is kind of important. Now, if you look at this diagram, the first finger is on the third string up from the bottom, and then the second finger is above it on the string on the same fret, and third finger is on the string below it. They're all on the second fret there. All right, so your first finger is on that third fret, and the other two fingers surround it. And then you have zeros over the fifth string and over the first string. So altogether, that's what an A major sounds like. Now you can see people will play this at 1, 2, 3, like this. If you notice, when I play that, my hands are big enough that I end up blocking the strings on either side. You can also do it 2, 3, 4. A lot of people will do that. You can also just bar or lay your first finger across all 3 strings, but then you're going to lose that note on the first string. And I'll do that sometimes. You know, if I'm playing something that's a little bit more rock and roll and I'm more playing the power chord, not the total open chord. So all of those are valid because the most important thing is that we can hear the A chord with the correct notes. And the reasons why we may choose to do different fingerings usually include the fact that sometimes the context that you're playing in determines, like when I do this bar thing, it's usually better for me to do it that way if I'm playing something that's more of like a AC/DC or a rock tune. Whereas the finger I'm giving you now, this is great because I hear all the open strings, and then there are a lot of common embellishments or different chord changes that actually fit with that as well. And moving on to the second chord, which is the D major, it gives me a common finger. So that first finger in the A chord is going to stay in place when I move to our second chord, which is the D major. And then I'm going to move my third finger, which is my ring finger, from the A chord. I'm going to go up a fret on the same string, and then my middle finger will go down to the first string. So here's my middle finger, ring finger, and first finger. But if I get used to this idea that I'm moving back and forth between those 2 chords without moving that first finger, it does 2 things for me. One of them is that when you take all your fingers off and have to put them back down, you have to pay attention to where you're putting them back down. Whereas when you're leaving that finger in that one place, you're maintaining physical contact with the guitar. And because of that, it's a lot easier to know where the next chord is going to be. The next thing is when we practice these, it also gives us kind of a hook to practice this around, because one of the most important things about our first set of chords is that we start learning them so that we can go from one chord to the next without having to stop and try and remember the chord. We practice that change as one thing. So when you learn these, when you're going from the A chord to the D chord, you know, without even strumming, it doesn't hurt to just go back and forth and practice that change without moving that first finger. Right? And then once you're done with that, then try going back and forth. The next chord we're going to talk about is E major. And while there's no common finger between A and E like there is between A and D, your first finger is on the same string and just moves back 1 fret. So what we get from that is we still have that physical contact, we just have to get used to moving back and forth. So this E major chord, first finger is on the first fret on the third string, second finger is on the second fret on the fifth string, and third finger is on the second fret on the fourth string. Then we play all 6 strings. It's a nice big sounding chord. So quick review, here is A major and what it sounds like. Here's D major. Remember this D major, we only play from the 4th string, and then there's X's above the 5th and 6th strings because we don't want it to sound like like that. That would be a completely different chord. And then E major is all 6 strings. Now the last thing we're going to do with these chords is we're going to give you a simple playing exercise. This will just get you so that you can move between the chords and you get used to actually strumming in time. What we're going to do is we're going to play 4 counts or 4 strums on each chord. You're just going to strum down on each one, and then we'll move on to the next one. We're not going to talk about metronomes or rhythms or anything like that in this lesson. All we're doing is we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's all we're going to do with this, and it's really just to get you so that you're getting used to strumming evenly with the right hand and playing just the strings that we want to hear. And also we're making these chord changes happen without stopping the strumming hand. One more time. So that was our first lesson. All we really did was we discussed what the instrument was, how we physically play it, and I showed you some chords and a real basic strumming exercise. We have lessons, and they're all going to be linked below, but there are lessons on time and counting, on strumming, on more chords, and as time goes on, we're going to be adding to this library of basically our beginning guitar series. One other thing that we do on this channel is about twice a week we do live stream lessons. You're more than welcome to log into the live stream and ask questions about any of this stuff. The live streams are usually dedicated to either a small topic that I'm going to discuss and then I answer questions, or they're just open forums and you guys can ask whatever you want and then I will answer them for you. The best way to know when these are is to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, and then you're going to get a notification probably about 30 minutes before one of these things happen. Right now, at the time of making this video, I'm usually doing these at 5:30 p.m. On Wednesday evenings, Pacific Standard Time. I'm in the Los Angeles area, or I'm doing them Saturday mornings at 8:30 a.m. So remember, that's Pacific Standard Time. But the easiest way to get in on those is to log in. They're free, and I'm there to answer your questions.